Good Saturday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for May the 6th. Hope that you had a great work week, and thank you for taking some time on this Saturday to read along with me here in the book of Numbers, called Another Audible on the schedule. We're going to read today 34 and 35, just because these two chapters deal with, again, some things concerning the land, and then tomorrow we'll have a shorter read on Sunday with a few wrap-up thoughts for our read through Numbers. Remember, Monday is a catch-up day, so on Tuesday we will be beginning the book of Deuteronomy, which is the last of our 5 opening books of the Pentateuch, and we will just continue making our march toward the end there, and then continue marching our way as the Israelites are going to be doing through the rest of the history books this year. Again, thanks for tuning in. Let me get the text of Numbers 34 and 35 up on the screen for us, and we will read along together here. Numbers 34 and verse number 1. Numbers 34, verse number 1, Yahweh spoke to Moses, command the Israelites, and say to them, when you enter the land of Canaan, it will be allotted to you as an inheritance with these borders. Your southern side will be from the wilderness of Zin along the boundary of Edom. Your southern border on the east will begin at the east end of the Dead Sea. Your border will turn south of the Scorpion's Ascent, proceed to Zin, and end south at Kadesh Barnea. It will go to Hazar Adar and proceed to Asmon. The border will turn from Asmon to the brook of Egypt, where it will end at the Mediterranean Sea. Your western border will be the coastline of the Mediterranean Sea. This will be your western border. This will be your northern border. From the Mediterranean Sea, draw a line to Mount Hor. From Mount Hor, draw a line to the entrance of Hamath, and the border will reach Zadad. Then the border will go to Ziphron and end at Hazar Enan. This will be your northern border. For your eastern border, draw a line from Hazar Enan to Shepham. The border will go down from Shepham to Riblah, east of Ain. It will continue down and reach the eastern slope of the Sea of Chinnereth. Then the border will go down to the Jordan and end at the Dead Sea. This will be your land defined by its borders on all sides. So Moses commanded the Israelites, this is the land you are to receive by lot as an inheritance, which Yahweh commanded to be given to the 9.5 tribes. For the tribe of Reuben's descendants and the tribe of Gad's descendants have received their inheritance according to their ancestral families, and half the tribe of Manasseh has received its inheritance. Remember that being on the eastern side of the Jordan. The 2.5 tribes have received their inheritance across the Jordan east of Jericho toward the sunrise. Verse 16, Yahweh spoke to Moses, these are the names of the men who are to distribute the land as an inheritance for you. The priest Eleazar and Joshua, son of Nun. Take one leader from each tribe to distribute the land. These are the names of the men. Caleb, son of Jephunneh, from the tribe of Judah. Shemuel, son of Ammihud, from the tribe of Simeon's descendants. Eldad, son of Kislon, from the tribe of Benjamin. Buki, son of Jogli, a leader from the tribe of Dan's descendants. From the sons of Joseph, Haniel, son of Ephod, a leader from the tribe of Manasseh's descendants. Kemuel, son of Shifton, a leader from the tribe of Ephraim's descendants. Eli Phazon, son of Parnach, a leader from the tribe of Zebulun's descendants. Paltiel, son of Azan, a leader from the tribe of Issachar's descendants. Ahihud, son of Shalomai, a leader from the tribe of Asher's descendants. Padahel, son of Ammihud, a leader from the tribe of Naphtali's descendants. These are the ones Yahweh commanded to distribute the inheritance to the Israelites in the land of Canaan. Chapter 35, Yahweh again spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho. Command the Israelites to give cities out of their hereditary property for the Levites to live in, and pasture land around the cities. The cities will be for them to live in, and their pasture lands will be for their herds, flocks, and all other animals. The pasture lands of the cities you are to give the Levites will extend from the city wall 500 yards on every side. The Levites will extend from the city wall 500 yards on every side. Measure 1,000 yards outside the city for the east side, 1,000 yards for the south side, 1,000 yards for the west side, and 1,000 yards for the north side, with the city in the center. This will belong to them as pasture lands for the cities. The cities you give the Levites will include 6 cities of refuge, which you will provide so that the one who kills someone may flee there. In addition to these, give 42 other cities. The total number of cities you give the Levites will be 48, along with their pasture lands. Of the cities that you give from the Israelites' territory, you should take more from a larger tribe and less from a smaller one. Each tribe is to give some of its cities to the Levites in proportion to the inheritance it receives. Verse number 9, Yahweh said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and tell them, when you cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, designate cities to serve as cities of refuge for you, so that a person who kills someone unintentionally may flee there. You will have the cities as a refuge from the avenger, so that the one who kills someone will not die until he stands trial before the assembly. The cities you select will be your 6 cities of refuge. Select 3 cities across the Jordan and 3 cities in the land of Canaan to be cities of refuge. These 6 cities will serve as a refuge for the Israelites and for the alien or temporary resident among them, so that anyone who kills a person unintentionally may flee there. If anyone strikes a person with a hot iron, or not with a hot iron, just with an iron object, and death results, he is a murderer. The murderer must be put to death. If anyone has in his hand a stone capable of causing death and strikes another person and he dies, the murderer must be put to death. If anyone has in his hand a wooden object capable of causing death and strikes another person and he dies, the murderer must be put to death. The avenger of blood himself is to kill the murderer. When he finds him, he is to kill him. Likewise, if anyone in hatred pushes a person or throws an object at him with malicious intent and he dies, or if in hostility he strikes him and with his hand he dies, the one who struck him must be put to death. He is a murderer. The avenger of blood is to kill the murderer when he finds him. But if anyone suddenly pushes a person without hostility, or throws any object at him without malicious intent, or without looking drops a stone that could kill a person and he dies, but he was not his enemy and did not intend to harm him, the assembly is to judge between the person who kills someone and the avenger of blood according to these ordinances. The assembly is to protect the one who kills someone from the avenger of blood. Then the assembly will return to the city of refuge he fled to, and he must live there until the death of the high priest who was appointed with the holy oil. If the one who kills someone ever goes outside the border of the city of refuge he fled to, and the avenger of blood finds him outside the border of his city of refuge and kills him, the avenger will not be guilty of bloodshed. For the one who killed a person was supposed to live in his city of refuge until the death of the high priest. Only after the death of the high priest may the one who has killed a person return to the land he possesses. These instructions will be a statutory ordinance for you throughout your generations, wherever you live. If anyone kills a person, the murderer is to be put to death based on the word of witnesses. But no one is to be put to death based on the testimony of one witness. You are not to accept a ransom for the life of someone who is guilty of murder. He must be put to death. Neither should you accept a ransom for the person who flees to his city of refuge, allowing him to return and live in the land before the death of the high priest. Do not defile the land where you live, for bloodshed defiles the land, and there can be no atonement for the land because of the blood that is shed in it, except by the blood of the person who shed it. Do not make the land unclean where you live and where I dwell, for I, Yahweh, reside among the Israelites. And that is Numbers 33 and Numbers 34. All right, these are more instructions concerning the land, and this is what I want to stress here in these couple chapters. And it really begins back up in, let's see here, back up in 30. Let's see, I mentioned it yesterday, I think. Oh, here it is. I was on the wrong chapter. That would help. At the end of 33, looking at verse number 51, it says, tell the Israelites, and this is kind of where it begins here within the section, when you cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, not if you do, but when you do this. Remember, what we're having here in these instructions is not just a if you ever find yourself in this situation, but it is, you're going to find yourself in this situation. This is going to be something that you're going to have to address when you come into the promised land. So these are not just instructions, but they are promises. They are promises that you will come into the promised land. So whenever you get into the promised land, not if, but when you enter the land of Canaan, it will be allotted to you as an inheritance with these borders. And again, it starts with south, west, north, and east. I'm not going to go through those again. Feel free to look again in your own time to look at just what these borders are. But I want to note that what is given here seems to be, best we can tell, much larger than what Israel ever controlled at one time. I think David probably had the largest borders of what was actually controlled by Israel, but they were still never this big, which shows that really this was the ideal of the promised land. This was the ideal portion that they were to inhabit had they done everything that they were supposed to, had they ever reached truly the pinnacle of their possible power. But something else that's interesting to note here is that these boundaries actually match up with the historical understanding of what constituted the land of Canaan. So it would be, for example, let's see, I'm trying to think of something that would be really easy to use to describe here. Let's just use Tennessee. Let's use Tennessee. All right, so Tennessee, your southern border is from this point to that point, and your western border is going to be the Mississippi River, and your northern border is going to be from the Mississippi River in this place all the way over to this place, the Appalachian Mountains, and then your eastern border is going to start in the Appalachian Mountains and move down into the foothills of southeast Tennessee, wherever it is. Let's say that that was let's just assume for a second that there was such thing as known as Tennessee, and it was recorded by someone else in history, not within the United States, within a book written about the United States. So then the borders given in the United States history book matched up with the history of outside of the United States. So these are two things that both thinking about Tennessee, and they both match up. That's what's being described here in Scripture. What is being described here is the borders of Canaan, what was known as Canaan to the entire region written in Scripture, was also historically accurate, going back all the way back to like the 15th century BC. So it's not that Yahweh is just making up some random borders. No, he is describing what ends up being known historically as the land of Canaan. So that's just an evidence for the Bible being historically accurate to the context of history. That here, what it describes, history also supports and says, yeah, that's actually the way that it was. So that's just an interesting tie-in between what's recorded here in history and something that's written and that is known outside of Scripture, and shows those two things lining up very well. Beginning of verse 16, I want to note that there are going to be individuals that are selected to do to work in the distribution of the land. The people don't choose them anymore. It actually says that God specifically chooses these individuals who would do this particular type of work. So maybe because of some previous instances where he allowed the people to choose, and that didn't exactly go very well. I'm thinking about, I don't know, where they went to scout out the promised land, where they went to go scout it out, and they did not come back with good report. Here, God says, no, I'm going to choose the individuals. They're going to get the job done, and we're going to be good to go from there. So that's chapter 34. Chapter 35 now gets into the cities for the Levites. And what's interesting here is that this continues a pattern going back many chapters throughout Numbers, where there are instructions given to the tribes, and then that is directly followed up by an instruction given to Levites, and it's necessary because the Levites were a special tribe. They did not have land for themselves, but as we can read here, they were given 48 different cities, 48 different cities. 6 of those would be known as the cities of refuge. And we also just should note here that the Levites, although they had a very special position, were still very much dependent on the generosity of their fellow Israelites, the Israelite community as a whole. They were given these various cities, and within that, you'd have, what was it? I think 2,000 square feet, or what was it? 2,000 yards or feet. Let me look at this again. Yeah, 2,000 yards. Going each side around, which somebody thankfully did this math that I did not do. And whenever you add up all of this land, you would have in these 48 cities, you would have about 15 total square miles. So out of all the land of Canaan, for the Levites, they would be given about 15 total square miles, which equates to 0.1% of the entire land of Canaan. 0.1%. So they did not get very much in the grand scheme of things, but they had what they needed. And they were able to perform this really incredible role of being the mediators between God's people and God himself. So we see that in verses 1 through 8. And again, mentioned in there are these cities of refuge. Now, this is very, very interesting to think about. What's the tie-in? Well, why mention this in all these writings concerning land? Well, the tie-in is this, is that Canaan is the holy land sanctified by God's presence among the people. Therefore, the land itself needed to be pure. What could cause the land not to be pure? Well, it would be whenever innocent blood has been shed upon the land. I think about this specifically from the story of Cain and Abel. Remember how Abel's blood cried out from the ground where it was spilled? Here's that kind of idea that this blood that is spilled cries out for injustice, or it just was not supposed to be shed. Therefore, the land would be impure. And as we're going to see within the text, the only thing that could purify the land whenever blood was shed was for the blood that shed it to be shed. But you have in this instance not just murderers mentioned here. The principle is very clear in that regard. There can be no atonement for the land because of the blood that is shed on it, except by the blood of the person who shed it. That if you murder with a stone, with something iron, with something wood, if there's hostility, if there's malice, if there's hatred, if those things are present in the situation, that's just straight up murder. And the avenger of blood, which very interesting, this Hebrew word here, goel, is the same word for the family redeemer that we know from the story of Ruth and other places. So this is somebody who is responsible for upholding basically the honor of the family. This would be the nearest male relative. So if somebody killed someone in the family, the nearest male relative, which I guess could be either the father or the brother, would be responsible in going and taking the life of the murderer in payment for the unlawful killing that had taken place. But we read in verse 22 that if it's not murder, if it is incidental killing with no malicious intent, that would be judged by their countrymen, as we see here within the text. The assembly is to judge between the person who kills someone and the avenger of blood according to these ordinances. So if there is an accidental killing, the statute is that individual who did the accidental killing would head towards the city of refuge, let them know this has taken place. The avenger of blood is to also go. There's to be a trial basically between the person who did the killing, the avenger of blood, and the residents of that city. And a lot of this detail is given in Deuteronomy 19, so we'll talk about that a little more there in a few weeks. And then they would judge basically what is to take place. If the individual is judged to truly have committed a incidental murder, if that is truly the case, then they're allowed admittance into the city where they can live. The avenger cannot take their life unless that individual leaves the city for some reason. Then the avenger catches them in the act and they can rightfully take their life as payment for the killing. But if everything goes as it's supposed to, then that person has to live there until the high priest dies. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, that's kind of weird, because what if the high priest dies very quickly? Well, then he didn't serve a sentence at all. Well, what if this other person lives for a very long time? Then they seem to serve a longer sentence. How is that fair? It's not about the sentence. It's not about time served. It's about the blood being shed. It is the high priest blood that atones for the blood that was accidentally or incidentally shed. So it's not about time served. It's about the blood itself. Remember, if a murderer murders someone, then their blood is required. If someone accidentally kills someone, that's still bloodshed, and the land still cries out for justice. So it's not going to be theirs because it's incidental, but it is that of the high priest who dies. Whenever that happens, this person is now released and they can go back to living. But in the process of this trial of sorts, we might call it, in our understanding, it does say that the testimony cannot be given just by one witness. It had to be on the basis of 2 or 3. So multiple witnesses are required. Also, whereas other cultures allowed for ransoming the life of the incidental or either the murder or the accidental killer, Hittite law allowed for such. That's not allowed here. Remember, blood demanded blood, whether it be the murderer's blood or whether it be the high priest's blood. Blood demanded blood. All of this is described and really summed up in verses 33 and 34. Do not defile the land where you live, for bloodshed defiles the land. This is all about the sanctity of Yahweh's promised land that he's given to the people. Do not defile my land by shedding blood. If you do, if you're a murderer, your blood will be demanded. If you're an accidental killer, then you have to live there until the high priest atones for you by his own death. Do not make the land, verse 34, do not make the land unclean where you live and here's really the real emphasis. Here's why. This is not just where you live, but it's where I dwell. For I, Yahweh, reside among the Israelites. Whether it be in their bodies, whether it be concerning the land and blood, everything must maintain a high level of purity and sanctification, because a holy God could not dwell among an impure people. That's why the need for all the animal sacrifices. That's why the need for these ordinances be carried out. It's why the need for the Day of Atonement, for sacred space and the people to be purified. All of this is an effort to make sure that God can continue to dwell among his people. And that's what they wanted. While they dwelled in the land, they wanted God to dwell with them. If you do that, then you got to make sure that these issues are taken care of and that true sanctification and purity is present within the land. I appreciate so much you tuning into this reading on this Saturday. I hope a lot of this makes sense. If you have any questions about what is found here within the text, then you are more than welcome to leave those in the comment section, and I'll be happy to give some more explanation or point you in the direction of some more info that you can look at. Hope you have a great rest of your Saturday. Looking forward to reading with you again tomorrow as we finish up our read through the book of Numbers. We'll be reading tomorrow in Numbers chapter 36, just a short chapter, tying up some loose ends, and then I'll have a few thoughts to conclude our read through Numbers. We'll have a day off on Monday for catch up, and then we'll begin reading in Deuteronomy on Tuesday. Again, if you have any questions, leave those below. But looking forward to reading with you again in the morning. Take care. God bless.